Jethro, good to see you. Thanks for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. I know you've had a sleepless night because your little one was up really, really early, so I appreciate you coming to me, even though you're only half awake. But thank you for that. I do appreciate you making a bit of time. Let me kick off with one of the things that when we talked about a number of things last time we spoke, but one of the things that stuck in my mind was your point was that AI is going to completely change how we play racket sports. Now, I used to play badminton as a kid and really enjoyed it, and squash actually. Um, Tell me how AI is going to change the way that works and how you play those games. I mean, how's that going to work and why does it matter?
Yeah, well, I think look, AI is touching all parts of our lives these
Yeah,
days, isn't it? And I don't know it necessarily fundamentally it's going to change the way that we play, but I think the way we learn and the way we interact with sports is fundamentally gonna change. I've got a background in online coaching and then online ratings or sports ratings. And I just know I see where this journey is going. I see that the companies that are being built and the companies that are evolving now in the space, leveraging AI, whether there's like intelligent refereeing, where they're using
right.
AI to analyze movements on the squash court, and there's so much subjectivity between a let and a no let and a stroke on the squash court at the moment, and
Yeah.
AI will hopefully be able to remove that subjectivity and offer guidance, whether it ends up 100% taking over the decision making or kind of goes the AI recommended decision is, and then the
And
referees.
do you think those things are going to be a good thing for the sport?
I think so. If they bring consistency in that sense, yeah, absolutely. If you can remove human error and subjectivity from refereeing, that
Yeah.
has to be a good thing. If nobody wants to lose a championship on a bad line call or a bad a bad decision. Think of rugby as well. Would AI come in there, a dubious scrum penalty? Nobody's quite sure. Can AI do that analysis in real time, provide the referee with better information? So I think a refereeing's an interesting angle. I think coaching, you're already seeing it, video analysis, looking at kind of biomechanics and technical analysis. There's a load of cool companies doing some really interesting things there. I think, obviously AI algorithms I think they're going to get smarter. They talk about AI having an IQ of 1600 by the end of this year, I believe. So if
Cleverer
we're kind
than me
of,
then.
say again. So
Cleverer
yeah,
than me then.
definitely cleverer than me with my lack of sleep last night, that's for sure. Um, so I think yeah, that's an interesting one where those algorithms go to and evolve, but then also just the camera analysis of every let's take paddle. There's definitely a world where every paddle court ends up with a piece of hardware and a camera embedded at the back. It's easy to film.
Yeah.
It's going to get cheaper and cheaper, so every match is going to get recorded, every point's going to be recorded. People want those clips to put on their Instagram to show off their
Yeah.
smashes and
Yeah.
highlight great rallies. But you layer that then with the AI analysis of how many winners you've made, how many errors you've made, what your opponents were doing. We'll be bringing into our technology to hopefully do initial level assessments. Our algorithm for the ratings, brilliant algorithm, just needs it takes a little while to get calibrated, right? Going into a new sport when you don't know players' levels because you end up with like buckets of players. Are they all like level 4 to 5s or are they all
So
level
what
one?
you're saying is the rating can be more precise using the
Well, I'm
tech.
saying what I'm saying is that you can use AI to set that initial level easier. We've got a very, very precise algorithm, but I think AI can come in and go, well, this person is about a 2.5, and that can be their starting level. Then the algorithms will kick in. So yeah, I absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of different use cases beyond those, but those are just the ones that are kind of immediately obvious to me. And whether, an AI coach is not going to totally replace a squash coach or a paddle coach, right? There's nothing, no substitute for somebody on court hitting balls and really
It might help.
understand.
You're saying that the technology might help them be better coaches.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
to your point, what's a good or is it a good or a bad thing? You don't want to remove, the human nature of sport, I guess, and that human interaction, that human touch point. But if you can be providing more data to those coaches that's validated and accurate and guaranteed, then that's a good thing. So for me, AI is going to be a tool, and I don't think it's ever going to totally, it's not going to totally replace humans in these senses, particularly around sport. So I think there's going to be a balance and a happy medium. But yeah, I think it's going to touch everything.
Yeah. I mean, whichever way it shakes down, I mean, it's not AI is not going away, is it? That's for certain. And tell me, I mean, we haven't really talked about your business. I mean, what is it that you're trying to do with the business that you're building? I mean, just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I was a squash player, a professional squash player by history, and started a company called SquashSkills in 2012, which is online coaching, so Netflix for squash coaching. That's still going 13 years on, 14 years on. Um, the world's biggest coaching brand. We've got 20 world number ones teaching you how to play, and people subscribe. But in 2019, I got involved with a company called Squash Levels. So my co-founder Richard had developed this algorithm, which is very, very clever, totally proprietary, rather than just being a traditional up if you win, down if you lose rating
Yeah.
system. It was all about performance compared to expected outcome. So he got some traction through the county leagues within England in 2019. We lived in the same city, and I was obviously doing the squash skills thing, thinking helping people improve their level, and he was measuring it. And then we went for a coffee and we are trying to figure out how we could collaborate. And once I got under the hood and under the skin and realized the traction he was getting, I was like, oh my God, there's an amazing business in here. You've got something really sticky that's providing real value in this highly accurate rating. So I got involved. Richard mm, data, right? He's a data guy and a coder. So the kind of commercial angle or the brand angle wasn't there, and that was just happened to be the thing that I was reasonably good at and had managed to commercialize squash online with the skills business. So we ended up being kind of a nice fit for each other. And yeah, but then we really went to town and launched Squash Levels in a new version. So it's a
That's the
system that,
rating. That's the business that's about ratings.
well, yeah, yes, yeah. So originally from Squash, and it's a system that aggregates all this data from all these different systems in one place. So we launched a week before COVID, and then that just shut everything down. So that was kind of frustrating, but at the same time, it just meant we actually got a clear run at things. So I was on Strava doing a lot of running through COVID, and then I thought, actually, there's a chance here to build a social network around ratings in the same way Strava has around GPS tracking. So over the COVID period, Richard built and built and built, and I was working on the partnerships. And then we came back post-COVID. Squash Levels launched really successfully, became the global standard now, endorsed by the World Squash Federation, the Professional Squash Association, and we do the world ratings for squash. But then off the back of that, we realized that we've got a very special product that can spin out into the other racket sports, which was where we created Level Tech, which is now the parent company that sits above everything. We're actually merging skills and levels into one company, and now we're rolling out the paddle rating. So looking like we're going to become the UK standard for paddle, working with some major booking platforms. And then the goal is to roll out badminton levels and table tennis levels and squash levels. Well, we've got squash levels, but create a suite of ratings across racket sports and potentially into cue sports and pool and snooker and darts. There's kind of unlimited
I mean, I
opportunity.
can see why you say, that's going to change things. I mean, I mean, that wasn't when I played badminton. That didn't really exist in any way,
Yeah.
shape, or form. But that whole kind of infrastructure could really, I mean, I think it could really enthuse young people. I mean, I was very competitive when I was young. I'm not so now, but very competitive. I mean, that kind of facilitates that kind of activity, doesn't it? I mean, and that must make it really exciting for youngsters, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, fundamentally, if you look at it, take a step back, sport is fundamentally more enjoyable when players are evenly matched, right? So if you're playing, whether you're playing a single sport or a double sport, if there's a mismatch, it's
Hmm.
not particularly enjoyable, whether you're winning easily or you're getting hammered, particularly if you're getting hammered, right? But if you actually play somebody who's a similar level or play with somebody who's a similar level against people of a similar level, the match is invariably balanced and then it's going to be much more fun.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
that's and so better ratings or accurate ratings allow better matchups, which create better competition. And that's kind of the fundamental
yeah.
ethos of the
So
whole.
it makes the whole thing more enjoyable. That's
Well,
your
it does, and I think it's kind of evolved slightly as well because we've people like data on themselves, so it's twofold. You've got this matchmaking element, and particularly with paddle being so expensive and finding partners, it's crucial. In squash, it was maybe more performance led, and it was like, how good am I? Am I improving? Where do I stand in the ratings, the rankings? These are accurate ratings more so than say a tournament-based ranking. So you've got that kind of competition layer, which is like, how good am I? Am I improving? Can I track that performance? And then you've got this social layer, which is, how can I find people that I'm going to have a better game with? And to your point that this didn't exist when you were playing competitive squash, you now make racket sports competitive at a social level and make it easier for people to play against people of the same level. They're going to play more, they're going to want to improve, they're going to invest more money in the sport, they're going to spend more time on the court. So it's just good for the whole sport. So, we see an opportunity to roll this out across five, six, seven, eight different sports, and you can become the infrastructure layer for the whole sport rather than just being, oh, this nice online product that people could subscribe to. It's like, no, this is actually a necessity to playing good level sport, whatever that sport may be. So that's kind of the exciting thing for us as a business at the moment, that we're
yeah.
building that infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the idea of the problem because you're absolutely right. I mean, playing against somebody that you can have a reasonable game with is so much more enjoyable than just turning up and getting thrashed.
Of course.
So I can absolutely see why it makes it more enjoyable, and that's got to be good for the players. I mean, I just think that's a great proposition. I mean, and how did you come up with the idea?
So Richard is the brains behind the operation. So he started with squash levels and he described it as his train set. I think he was running some key, worked at Hewlett Packard, a software developer, and he developed some software to support some county league play. And then being the kind of maths boffin that he is, he was like, I wonder if I can measure how good these people
Right.
are.
Right.
So it was very organic, and he just described it as his train set. And then he'd been chipping away, and I mean, you should have seen the website. It was inspired by the Microsoft paperclip. I always tease him about that as if it was. It was that kind of old school data splurged everywhere, but there was tons of interesting data. And somebody would say to him, "Oh, it'd be nice if this did this," and then he'd just build it in his spare time. It's kind of the mentality that he had, which was incredible. And it was kind of this gift to the squash world. Um, but then once I got involved in 2019, I was just like, God, people are all over this and
Yeah.
it's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we could do something fun with it. And then once that caught on, then I obviously realized the opportunity beyond just squash and the scale up opportunity. So I'm not taking credit for the idea, definitely Richard. I'm taking credit for the kind of global vision into the other sports, I
Yeah,
guess.
I mean, a great proposition. Whoever came up with the idea, it's a great proposition. I mean, I love it. Like I say, I wish it had been around when I was a youngster.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about something that interests me about building businesses. I mean, I come across a lot of CEOs and they've got views about things. They've got things that they think are really important, what we would describe as values. In what way, perhaps, have your values shaped the way you've approached building the business? I mean, you talked a little bit earlier about, you don't want to lose the human part and simply hand everything over to AI. I mean, that's an example. I mean, have you got other things where your values have influenced how you've approached building the business?
I think it's like transparency and fairness fundamentally. We obviously you need to be protective of the IP because we've got this
Yeah, yeah,
unique
yeah.
unique algorithm, but you try and explain to people as much as possible how this works. So, I guess part of the traditional issues with say tournament-based rankings, I came through the junior um, Welsh Junior pathway, and you could turn up to events, and it becomes a like who's got you could buy your way to a good ranking, right? So the richest families could go and play the most tournaments or travel to the
Yeah,
furthest
yeah,
places and build a ranking. The beauty of ratings is that actually we just take your last four or five matches into consideration. It's an accurate reflection of how good you are
yeah.
rather than being able to just go and play all these tournaments, get your maximum divisor, and then buy a ranking. So fairness, underpins it all, and you're trying to kind of democratize the sport. So with skills, from on the coaching business side of things, I've always believed that the players with the best access or localized access or access to the best coaches have kind of got an unfair advantage, right? But in building squash skills, we've got 20 world number ones on the site and 60 different coaches from all over the world. We go and do the filming, we do the editing, we put the content together. So that means that everybody around the world, no matter where they are, can get access to high level squash coaching, regardless of where they are in the world. So I think just kind of opening things up, and democratizing the sport in that sense, whilst building community
Mm.
and connectivity. I think, I've been very lucky with squash. I've been in it since I was 7. It's always felt like a close-knit community. It's not small because it's not a tiny sport, but it's not football, right? So, and you get to the stage where you kind of seem to know everybody. So I think community underpins everything we've done as well, and be very supportive of the squash community. And I feel like the squash community is very supportive of me as well. So, yes, those are certainly
Yeah, yeah.
some of them.
One of the other things that people, I mean, again, I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, and pretty much all of them have said to me that building a business is like riding a roller coaster or a variation on that theme. There are good days and there are days that aren't so good, and there's kind of pretty much everything in between, isn't there? I mean, what is it about this particularly that you gets you to bounce out of bed in the morning and kind of get back in the fray? I mean, what is it that motivates you particularly?
Interesting. I mean, impact in a way. I think I had a desire with squash. Like I was a professional player. I was kind of mad on it from the age of 7, and I remember waking up early and just doing practices against the door in the living room. And I was obsessed by it, and I wanted to be as good a squash player as I could. And then I was on the tour, and I was 85 in the world, 86 in the world, and was the biggest mover in the whole world for that year. And then I tore my hamstring off my pelvis, playing in the World's University Championships in Egypt. And that kind of cut my career short. So I was never going to be top 10 in the world, but I think I could have been top 40, top 50. I was on a good trajectory. My points were stacking up nicely, and I was doing well as a 23, 24-year-old. Um, so that the fact that that got cut short and I lost my lottery funding, and then it's like, I never quite got to the top of the squash world. But now through this kind of weird entrepreneurial journey of coaching and online coaching and now ratings, which was never the plan, I've got to the top of the squash world in a different way, in an unconventional path and an unconventional route. And all the people that I've worked with have been the best players in the world, or the most influential people in the whole squash world. So that's been interesting and nice. And I, feel like, this career that I've built in squash, just want to make sure we do a good job of. But then I think, there's a wider impact piece here, which is, let's how big can this thing be? How much scale can we create? There's obviously problems to solve. As I said to you, paddle ratings I think are broken at the moment. But I also see there's a big opportunity, and obviously you're looking at financially growing a business. You think I'm a founder, an entrepreneur, and what's the opportunity and what's the true scale of this business? So I'm intrigued. You're obviously intrigued by that,
Mm.
but working in sport, being involved with sport, breaking out of the squash bubble as well, I think is an interesting one, because I've only really known squash my whole life until 2 years ago. And now I'm working in Padel, which is the fastest growing sport in the world. Everybody wants a piece of it. So suddenly kind of going from a sport which was squash, which, from the 80s and 90s in its heyday is probably contracted globally. We've got into the Olympics. There's definitely some green shoots. But padel's doing what squash did in the 80s in the UK with private equity coming in and courts being built. So I think there's an excitement around the opportunity within paddle, and then you look at the wider sports ecosystem, and you just see these kind of open goals in table tennis and badminton because they don't have this rating system. Like we've got the best rating system in the world. We've delivered a ton of value. We've really changed the way people interact with the sport here. Being able to do that for these other sports is exciting. as
Yeah,
well.
no, I certainly get that. And the thing, I mean, I'm biased because I like sport, but I mean, the thing that always strikes me about sport, I mean, it's a very divided world at the moment. Sport is one of those things that brings people together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like music, actually.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
but it's more, in one sense, it's more participative.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a bit unfair on music, actually. But I mean, the thing is, sport is a great vehicle for bringing people together, and I think there's, to be able to help do more of that seems to me to be a great proposition. Let me ask you. I mean, one of the other things that when I talk to entrepreneurs, riding that roller coaster can be hard work. I mean, have there been any particular things that or decisions that have kind of kept you awake at night?
Yeah. Made some bad decisions in 2015, 2016. So I raised the first chunk of investment from the States, or some from the States and some over here. It was about 250,000 pounds. Yeah, it was a decent chunk. And got promised. I was a naive young 26, 27-year-old entrepreneur, I guess. And I was in partnership with Peter Nicol, who was the former world number one for 5 years. We started SquashSkills together. He was living in the States, I was living over here. There was a little bit of a kind of a power tussle going on, I guess it's probably fair to say, about where we did this development. And they just moved to New York. They potentially wanted to use a New York agency. I wanted to use a local agency. And rather than building it in-house. And we ended up using this development agency. They weren't up to the
Jethro,
job, fortune,
sorry, I
cost them
lost
more
the
than.
sound then. Say that again. Sorry, your sound disappeared.
So yeah, just saying, we an awful decision around the web agency we chose to use to build that first product.
Mm.
So it was £250,000 investment, took way longer than expected, spent most of that on development costs, and then we just got problems and problems for 4 or 5 years. And what obviously, we had backing then from these investors, and we just weren't able to really convert and deliver on the opportunity that we had. So that was horrible because you're then kind of fending off the decision making for forcing this agency, and then you're fighting the agency and just trying to keep your head above
And
water.
what did you learn from that experience? I mean, it sounds pretty awful, but did you come away thinking, would you say you're a wiser person as a result?
Um, Yeah, I mean, yeah, naively. I mean, without getting too into the weeds of it, I think we tried to just build everything in one go. And obviously, working in tech, you just realize that actually small incremental changes and MVPs and building from there make much more sense. Obviously, since I've become part of Squash Levels, we have our internal tech team and we have our own team of developers. And that is worlds apart from paying an agency, hundreds of pounds an hour. So I think building, if you're working in tech, obviously AI and vibe coding is changing things, and some simplified products can be vibe coded, and that makes it easier for people to be building their own products. Not that I've experimented with it myself, because I haven't needed to. But having in-house development, I think if you're going to be involved in tech really and making meaningful changes, I don't see how you can outsource it, totally to an agency in a really meaningful way if you really want to build a
Useful
big
things to
product.
learn early on, though, I would say. Um,
So,
Let me ask you about one of the other things that I think is interesting about building a business is that as you get bigger, you get more people on board and what have you. One of the interesting things is how you kind of keep the business, and this is the job of the CEO, is how do you keep the business on the front foot, if you like, leaning into whatever's. What's your take on how you do that? I mean, particularly, I mean, this may or may not be the case with you, but I certainly struggled when we had remote teams. We had teams in India and stuff, and very difficult to keep people pushing forward as fast as you'd like when they're on the other side of the planet. I mean, what's your take on those sorts of issues about how you keep people moving forward?
I think it's very easy for me as a co-CEO alongside Richard, but I can get carried away, and I'm a bit of a magpie and drawn to shiny things.
Yeah.
I'm an eternal optimist. And I guess I'm always looking to the vision, right, without it sounding too silly. But it's like, what's the opportunity here? What can we build next? What can we do? Oh, what's that partnership? What's this? So I find my mind is constantly going about what's the opportunity. And Richard's a realist, right? And he comes from that tech background. He's just immediately thinking, right, what's the problem here? What's the challenge? How do we build this? How do we overcome this? So I think the challenge for us, particularly in the early days, was like a new idea would pop into my head, and I'd be going to him saying, "Well, what about this? It's a brilliant idea. Where can we build
Yeah,
it?" He'd just be
yeah,
trying to keep up.
yeah.
So I think now it comes back to like process, right, and ruthless prioritization effectively, and that's the only thing that you could do because these ideas don't stop.
No.
And if they did, then I'm not doing my job properly. But I can't be just forcing those ideas to be the next thing in the roadmap or the next thing that's built. So I think you've got to have solid processes in place and a solid filtering process, and then a solid decision-making framework about what then gets implemented. Because there'll always be this long laundry list of things to do and potential ideas that could be created. And if we've had internal discussions, and Richard at times has felt, and probably still does, but feel incredibly overwhelmed by the amount of work to do. And there's
Yeah.
only so many hours in a day, so many hours in the week, and then it just has to come down to priorities. And it's like, all right, well, what's more the most important thing at this time? And then we kind of we work in month, 6 week sprints. Where it's like, okay, well, we've prioritized this block for this period. This is what we're going to do. Then we'll do a review at the next one, see what new ideas have come up, what are the next things in. So I think, yeah, ruthless prioritization. I worked with an advisor, and he always used to use that term. And that was more on the growth and the marketing side of things. But it was like, look, we can't do every single idea badly,
Somebody famous, I forget who it was, said strategy is mainly what you don't do. And I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of that. I mean, I'm like you. I get, distracted by things that look interesting,
yeah,
usually irrelevant, but look interesting at the time. It's only with
yeah,
retrospect I look back and think, why did I do that? So I share that shiny object thing.
yeah.
Look, let me ask you about one of the other things that's interesting. I mean, in the modern, building a business at the moment there is such a lot of uncertainty. I mean, as we're talking about this, I mean, there's all this kind of stuff going on in Iran and oil prices going up, which is going to cause an economic shock, and there is. I think probably more uncertainty now than there has ever been, in lots of ways, and that makes it really difficult for business. I mean, I don't know whether you've been affected by things that are happening at the moment, but what's your view about how? I mean, I'm interested in how CEOs figure out a way through uncertainty. Because essentially you come down to making a bet. I'm going to do this, not do that, because I think I'm betting on, I don't know, but I think this is the best option. I mean, what's your take on how you sort of find your way through that maze?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I guess look, we're dealing with squash, right? Fundamentally, and now paddle. So it's squash players, and we've gone through certainly COVID was obviously a major period of uncertainty, whereas people essentially stopped playing the sport, and
Yeah.
now I guess we're obviously looking at something unknown at this stage. But fundamentally, we have got something that no matter how uncertain things are, people want that escapism from that uncertainty, and doing passions and hobbies is something that they continue to do. With squash skills, we have been a disposable luxury, I guess. It's like, do you really need this online
Yeah,
coach in
yeah,
your pocket,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But that being said, through COVID, we managed to retain 80% of our customer base on a subscription business when nobody was playing squash. And we really doubled down, comes back to the values on community. And we were putting out home training programs and
Okay.
like you could join WhatsApp groups, and you were working with the best players in the world in a WhatsApp group, and you were doing their training programs over 6 blocks and all this kind of stuff. And because it's global, we had this global connectivity. We were able to kind of keep people motivated even when they weren't playing squash. They were doing physical training, and with the comments we had from participants about their mental health and how good it was. So the community element came back to it. So this uncertainty, I guess we're lucky that people are always gonna want to make time for their hobbies. But on the flip side, disposable income becomes a challenge where you've got a subscription business and subscriptions are everything's a subscription, right? I have a subscription for my coffee, I pay for Spotify, it's Netflix. So we're not just competing against squash coaching, we're competing against all these other subscriptions. And when people look at their bank statements, and in fact, banks are even saying, did you know you've got this subscription going, right? So
Yeah.
you've got a churn rate challenge in that respect. And then we're battling with time as well with the squash skills side of things because you require people to spend half an hour to go and get value from this content, sit down and watch and learn. Whereas the ratings product, you don't actually need them to change their behavior. It's just delivering value in the background. So the our churn rate's much lower on that than it is
It kind of
on the
gives
one.
you a slightly more balanced portfolio in terms of your offer, doesn't it? But the point, I guess, so just to summarize what you're saying, I mean, the point you're making is to look for the silver lining within the cloud, isn't it? I mean, COVID was a big problem, but there was an opportunity within that problem to carry on engaging with your customers, and that
Yeah.
creates value for people, doesn't it? I mean, that's
Yeah,
basically.
and it created a new product line and nothing is I'm a firm believer essentially there are obviously extremes to this, but nothing is like really good or bad. If you look hard enough, you
Yeah,
can find good in something. My injury at the time, tore my hamstring off my pelvis, my squash career is over. This is awful. Looking back, that was the catalyst for starting squash skills because without that injury, I would have been grinding it out, trying to get to top 50 in the world and not making any money as a squash player, right? So I do genuinely believe nothing is good or bad if you really
yeah,
look hard enough. But yeah, I mean, to your point on dealing with uncertainty, we've kind of been slightly insulated from it, but we keep doing what we can do as well as we can and adapt. And then, with this Iran uncertainty, we're raising capital, we're raising money from VCs. It's just keep building. The thing we can do then, if we've got that money in the bank and we've got runway, is build brilliant product, and then hopefully when the world does normalize a little bit, we've just got an incredible product for people to be working with.
yeah,
I guess.
yeah. Well, I certainly hope that the world does normalise. I mean, I believe it when I see it, but I like the idea. Let me ask you about. Uh, Global. So one of the great opportunities at the moment, digital technology enables you to work all over the planet, but
Yeah.
that also exposes you to global competition. Now, I know there's not many people doing what you're doing at the moment. I mean, that will probably change at some point. But one of the other things that interests me is doing business in different parts of the world is very different. Doing business in London it's very different, for example, to doing business in LA or in Singapore or in Hong Kong or whatever. What's your feeling about that kind of need to localize? I mean, if you take squash as a for instance, I mean, squash is really big in some countries and it's not so big in other countries. Sport is really important in some countries and is less important in other countries. I mean, what's your take on that kind of that need to localize, if you like, to take account of different cultures and different expectations? I mean, has that influenced the way you're expanding the business?
It hasn't to this point, in all honesty. Fundamentally, the squash federation demographic, it's a connected world. It comes back to that relatively small world. There's definitely some countries that are slower moving than others, or less professional than others, or have less access to funding. But I think I believe it like it's the individuals within those federations, like squash federation employees, and it ranges from the well-funded, well-backed professional outfits to volunteers who are going beyond their kind of their day job and working in extra hours. So of course, cultural differences can appear in different countries, but I often find it's on such an individual basis with the organizations that I've been working with. Obviously there's a need to kind of offer translation and localize in that sense, but we're not off on trade missions and going to input. It's just not the nature or the scale of the business that we've had. It's been on Zoom, it's been remote. You bump into people at a squash tournament. So we've kind of been lucky in that sense that
Yeah.
we're all back
I mean, I
together.
think I think as you just pointed out, being able to engage with people over Zoom enables you to get to know them, even though you're not on the same continent that they are, or whatever. I mean that I think is one of the great benefits of what's happening at the moment. I think, um, and when you look back on the business, or when you look at the business, I mean, what would you say are the factors that have made your business successful?
Relationships, fundamentally.
Right.
So yeah, it's twofold because I was able to as a professional player, I built up a personal brand. I wasn't the greatest squash player in the world, I was 85 in the world. It wasn't like reached the upper echelons, but I played for Wales in World Championships and European Team Championships. I played against the best players in the world. I was at all those events. My business partner in Squash Skills was Peter Nicol, who was one of the greatest players of all time. So that instantly brought credibility. My relationship then with the Alex Goff, who's the CEO of the World Tour, he's a great friend of mine. PSA became great supporters of us. But through that credibility and that personal brand, I guess that I built up from as being a squash player, that then opened up the doors to the federations who go, well, we know Jethro, and oh yeah, well, this sounds like a cool product. Yes, we'll support here. We'll try here. So I think that fundamentally has allowed me to get those conversations directly. Somebody's prepared to make that introduction, well, or I didn't need the introduction in the first place, but that opened up doors globally because of the relatively small nature of squash as a sport, and everyone knows everyone. So yeah, I think fundamentally relationships meant that doors opened, which meant that we're able to get the product in and we're trusted.
Yeah.
And then I also think once you prove a product works in one region, it's very easy to build a case study and showcase that it works. So you've got relationships and credibility and history, then the rest kind of falls into play. And it's really interesting now going into paddle as a completely new sport where I haven't got those doors opening in the same way at certainly the federation level. But in the UK market, a lot of squash players have moved to paddle.
Right.
So when they hear the paddle levels, oh, that's by the guys who do squash levels, they've all had the squash experience, and so it's credibility and relationships, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
fundamentally.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting you make that point because there's a lot of talk at the moment about the way AI is going to change the way things work. I mean, in business, it's difficult to see. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's difficult to see how business works without kind of human connection. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out in future. And on that journey, I mean, what would you say are the kind of critical moments that have shaped you as a CEO, not just as an individual, but as a CEO? Is there anything that's happened to you that has changed the way you approach the job, perhaps?
That's a really good question. Um, I think getting burnt back in 2015 definitely changes the mindset then.
Mm.
Um, but then I think working with Richard fundamentally alongside a co-founder who with complementary skills, I think that's a real kind of realization that actually you can get in your lanes, and when you are able to trust each other, he trusts me totally on the commercial side of things, I trust him totally on the tech side of things. That when you realize you've got like a winning combination that aren't battling in the same space, we're totally in different lanes but totally complementary lanes. I think that's been a big moment. uh,
A really important lesson, actually, I think, because you see so many other people get that wrong.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, I mean, and that's where Pete and I have, we're great mates, but it was a bumpy business relationship fundamentally because we both sat in the same space. We're both non-technical squash players, albeit he's a far better one than me, but both non-technical squash players trying to grow a tech startup.
Yeah.
trying to figure out these roles, and it was bloody mess at times. Whereas coming in with Richard, you create a team with different skill sets, albeit completely different personalities, but equally, those opposite kind of traits in our personality totally complement each other because we kind of meet in the middle. We can have a disagreement, but never really turns into too much beyond that. But yeah, I think that's really fascinating, is not having two similar personalities or two similar skill sets at the top of the business and being able to set them apart.
And let me ask you, what would you say is the most difficult decision you've had to make as the CEO? Because that's the other thing about being a CEO is all the difficult stuff lands on your desk, doesn't it? I mean, what would you say is the most difficult thing you've had to deal with?
Never, letting people go is obviously not a nice one. I've always struggled with that, and I'm quite conflict avoidant, I guess. So I've always put faith and trust in people. The way I wanted to work is quite hands-off managerial style, and I don't want to be micromanaging and let people do their thing. So, having people that haven't really paid that trust when you're naturally kind of hands off and then conflict avoidant. I've always struggled with that, and I guess something yeah, is a weakness because I think at times you obviously have to be a bit more direct, but at the same time we have the turnover of staff is so low and small. We're really fortunate. We're like a little family, or big, 17 people now at the moment. But it's nice, and I think if you can put that faith and trust in and build a team in that sense, it's great. But yeah, obviously letting people go. And then now I guess, we're going through this VC raise and not having raised venture capital and suddenly looking at, well, past the term sheet and into the legals, and you just kind of realize that, okay, I found a led business where we're the real decision makers. You're kind of handing over the keys in many ways, and investor approval on your consent matters. It's like, okay, well, we're really stepping into a different journey here and going on a different path that is ultimately ceding control. So I think, signing those forms is going to be an interesting one, taking
Big
venture
moment,
capital.
isn't it? Big moment.
Yeah, it really is. And so I think that's probably the biggest one.
Any
To
mistakes? Any particular mistakes that haunt you?
those developers. Um, we messed things up with US squash back in the day. We put a deal in place, and maybe we were a bit overly expectant of the value that would come back, and we kind of messed a relationship, like a key stakeholder relationship, up for a number of years. Kevin, the CEO, he actually just left, but we never really got our relationship back on track, and
Mm.
it was the fastest growing market in the world, the biggest market now. And that was a shame because that kind of hindered us and still has hindered us. So look back on that, would have liked to have done that differently. The early days, we're figuring things out with Pete. I think in reality, I think we both say it was challenging because of both operating in the same space and the way we made some of those decisions,
Yeah. Let me
naive.
ask, ask you about the flip side to that. I mean, what are the things that you've enjoyed most about it? I mean, you certainly, when we've spoken in the past, you certainly come across as pretty enthusiastic. I mean, what have you enjoyed most about building this business?
I think just the fact that no 2 days are the same,
Yeah,
and there's always an opportunity. I like the new things to come back to the shiny things and magpies, and it's the problem solving. And for me, it's how things fit together.
yeah,
I take a really, really
yeah,
high level view and can kind of go, well, that could go there and this could go there, and oh wow, that wouldn't that be amazing if we make that work? But it's a very high level. Rich and I actually had this conversation the other day. It was like kind of drives me nuts in that I'm always in the detail and trying to figure out how we make this actually work. And you're just going, well, that's the opportunity. Look over there, look at that.
yeah,
I love that. And I love the kind of connecting people, connecting businesses, connecting founders, connecting opportunities. I think that's that's the most exciting thing for me.
If you were going to start from scratch, anything you'd do differently?
Yeah, just owned the tech from day one. Just raised more money, built a tech team, got a technical co-founder in early on, and built product. Because I had a vision for when we built Squash Skills, it was always, oh, we could prove this is squash, and then we can scale this out to other sports. And I, wanted to build a coaching and training platform together. So because if 2012 was very early days of YouTube, online coaching wasn't a thing. And I just thought there was an opportunity to build hey, you can learn how to do this here, and then you can go and do your training over there. And it should have been one slick app. And we got these developers in Bath on a web developers, weren't even app developers, built this platform that was clunky, old legacy, and never fulfilled that vision. And that was 2012 until 2020 when we actually replaced that. I think so. You had
Uh-huh.
effectively 8 years of
Mm.
lost time, and then we ended up
It's
using someone.
interesting you highlight the timescales because it illustrates the damage that making the wrong choice
Yeah,
do, isn't it? I mean, it's very easy looking back to say that was the wrong choice. It's much more difficult at the moment you're making the decision to be sure that it's the right thing or the wrong thing. I mean, and
especially
it's
when you
interesting the difficulties it creates, isn't it?
oh, and especially when you suddenly 20, 30, 40 grand deep with a developer
Yeah.
and a load of codes
Yeah.
being written. Code's a bottomless pit of cash, right? And yeah, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Um, but yeah, I just seeing how we work with an in-house tech team now,
Much better.
that would have yeah, yeah, the biggest thing definitely could have done. And then
One,
finding those, yeah, complementary skill sets early on
yeah.
as well.
One last thing. I mean, if you were to offer a bit of advice to a rookie CEO starting out, I mean, what would you suggest?
I think you can learn a decent amount from like a good mentor. I've had some good ones over the years. Like finding your way, you'll make mistakes, and there's definitely a way to accelerate that. I think, working with people who've been there and done it, it seems to be a natural thing of ex founders and CEOs. What's the next thing? They've got millions
Surround
in the bank.
yourself with smart people, is what you're saying, isn't it?
It is. Well, it's smart, but well, no, I don't know smart's the right term, actually. I think it's people with experience. I think it's more important. I think anybody can be smart. You can have tons of smart founders who haven't done it before, and they'll be young, bright things and all these ideas. But actually, the people who bear the war wounds and the scars of having
Yeah.
gone through that scale up process. So, yes, smart, but and experience. I think that's the crucial bit. And there's tons of kind of getting people on with some equity of fast agreements. Just really understanding that because it's there's plenty of pitfalls,
Yeah.
undoubtedly. So I think
I think that's an understatement to say there's plenty of pitfalls. I mean, you can't avoid them. I don't think that.
yeah,
Jethro, that was it was been as always. It's great fun to chat with you, and thank you for taking a bit of time to share that story. And I mean, I think your final comment there about finding people that understand what it's like and have got some experience and are willing to kind of share their thoughts and experiences. I mean, I think that's a really good piece of advice to end with. So, thank you for taking the time out, and good luck going forward.
thanks, Paul. I really enjoyed that, and thanks for having me.
Likewise. Cheers, Jethro. Bye bye.